The year is 1893. A young boy in Germany loses both his parents. His name is Hans Wilsdorf. Orphaned at just 12 years old, Hans inherits a small fortune, but while traveling it's stolen. With nothing left, only his determination and a fascination for watches, Hans begins a journey that will forever change the way the world tells time. This is the story of Rolex, the watch that conquered oceans, mountains, and even space. Early life and first inspiration. Hans grew up in Kulmbach, Germany. After the tragedy of losing his parents, he was sent to boarding school. It was there that he befriended a Swiss student who introduced him to the world of Swiss watchmaking. In the late 1800s, Switzerland was quickly becoming the capital of precision timepieces. Hans was mesmerized, not just by the beauty of watches, but by the engineering behind their accuracy. He knew this was his future. At just 19 years old, he moved to La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland, where he worked at a watch company. His job was to test the accuracy of hundreds of pocket watches every day. This meticulous work gave him an obsession to create a watch that was both precise and elegant. Struggles in London. In 1903, at the age of 22, Hans moved to London. He carried with him a small inheritance of 3,300 German marks. But during his travels, the money was stolen. He was penniless in a foreign country. Still, Hans refused to give up. He took a job at a watch trading company where he learned something crucial. At that time, most companies were focused on ornate designs and fancy cases, but Hans noticed that customers valued reliability and accuracy more than decoration. This was the seed of an idea. If he could make watches that were accurate, durable, and stylish, they could conquer the world. Founding Wilsdorf and Davis. In 1905, at only 24 years old, Hans founded his own company in London, Wilsdorf and Davis. His brother-in-law Alfred Davis provided the startup capital. Their first creation was the Portfolio pocket watch, a portable design inside a leather case. It was successful, but Hans had bigger dreams. While most people believed pocket watches would always dominate, Hans was convinced the future belonged to wristwatches. At that time, wristwatches were seen as fragile and mostly for women. Men considered them impractical. Hans set out to change that. The bracelet watch revolution. In 1906, Wilsdorf and Davis launched bracelet watches. By designing strong, stylish gold and silver straps, he made them fashionable for both men and women. Slowly, the stigma faded and wristwatches began to catch on. But Hans knew that to build a global brand, he needed a powerful name. After testing over 100 ideas, he found one that was short, memorable, and easy to pronounce in every language: Rolex. In 1908, Rolex was officially trademarked. Precision above all. Hans's obsession was accuracy. In 1910, Rolex produced the first wristwatch in the world to receive official certification as a chronometer, a standard of supreme precision. By 1914, Rolex received another milestone. A watch awarded the prestigious Class A certificate from the Kew Observatory in England. This was normally reserved for marine chronometers, proving Rolex wristwatches were as reliable as instruments used by navigators at sea. Rolex was no longer just a brand. It was a symbol of trust, war, and survival. But then World War I broke out. The British government placed heavy taxes on luxury imports, and Rolex's London operations nearly collapsed. To survive, Hans made a bold decision. He moved the company headquarters to Geneva, Switzerland, a neutral country and the center of watchmaking. There, Rolex Watch Company Limited was born. During the war, soldiers realized pocket watches were impractical in battle. They needed something tough and reliable on their wrist. Rolex answered with the trench watch: rugged casing, unbreakable glass, and luminous hands that glowed in the dark. When the war ended, veterans returned home wearing Rolex watches. And soon every man wanted one. The oyster case, a waterproof revolution. By the 1920s, Rolex faced a new challenge. Wristwatches were still vulnerable to dust and water. In 1926, Rolex introduced the oyster case, the world's first truly waterproof watch. To prove it, Hans needed a daring demonstration. He partnered with Mercedes Gleitze, a young swimmer attempting to cross the English Channel. She wore the Rolex Oyster during her 10-hour swim. Though she couldn't finish the crossing, the watch emerged in perfect condition. Hans used this story in newspaper ads, famously displaying the oyster in aquariums with live fish. It was genius marketing and sales exploded. The perpetual rotor, the first automatic Rolex. Rolex's next leap was convenience. In 1931, Hans introduced the perpetual rotor, a self-winding mechanism powered by wrist movement. This invention gave birth to the Rolex Oyster Perpetual, the ancestor of nearly every modern automatic watch. Post-war triumphs and iconic models. After World War II, Hans faced personal tragedy. His wife passed away in 1944. Still, he pressed forward. In 1945, Rolex celebrated its 40th anniversary with the Datejust, the first automatic watch with a date window on the dial. Later, Hans added the famous Cyclops lens, magnifying the date for easier reading. Rolex then launched models that would become legends. Explorer, 1953, worn during the first successful ascent of Mount Everest. Submariner, 1953, a diver's watch, waterproof up to 100 meters. GMT Master, 1955, created for Pan Am pilots crossing multiple time zones. Day-Date, 1956, the first watch to display both day and date. Each of these models wasn't just a watch, it was a tool for professionals. Into the depths, the deep-sea challenge. Rolex's thirst for adventure went deep. In 1960, the experimental Rolex Deep Sea Special was attached to a submarine that descended into the Mariana Trench, 11,000 meters below sea level. When the submarine resurfaced, the watch was still ticking perfectly. This cemented Rolex as the watch that could survive anything. The legacy of Hans Wilsdorf. In 1960, Hans Wilsdorf passed away at the age of 79. But he had prepared carefully for the future. He left his company to the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a non-profit trust that still owns Rolex today. This means Rolex is not driven by short-term profit, but by its long-term vision, innovation, excellence, and heritage. Rolex in culture and symbolism. Beyond technology, Rolex became a cultural icon. In sports, it sponsored tennis, golf, Formula One, and yachting. In cinema, James Bond wore a Rolex Submariner in early films, making it a symbol of elegance and toughness. World leaders, artists, and explorers wore Rolex as a statement of achievement. Rolex watches came to symbolize not just wealth, but success, resilience, and timeless style. Closing words. From an orphan boy who lost everything, to the founder of the world's most iconic watch brand, Hans Wilsdorf's story is one of vision, resilience, and relentless pursuit of perfection. Rolex is more than a watch. It is a legacy built not just to tell time, but to define it. This is the story of Rolex.